Good afternoon, everybody. Good evening for some of us. I'm Stephen, CEO of BugHerd. It is 11:30 p.m. here in Australia, so unlike most of you on the call, I imagine it's a little bit late, and my brain is not entirely working. However, we'll do our best to get through this. We have a really great topic today, which is agency success blueprint for web development and navigating predictability, profit margins, and tech tools with a great technology partner of ours called Productive. Basically, we're always looking to bring value to our customers. Today, we're joined by Fran Vižintin from Productive. Productive is an innovative agency management platform. Like us, shares a commitment to helping agencies grow and thrive. Fran brings a wealth of experience here, having spoken with over 1,100 agencies over the past few years, and garnered a lot of insights from those discussions that he's going to share with us today. So, core focus is around three crucial areas for agency success. So, predictability, understanding utilization rates, resource allocation; profitability, maximizing margins; managing overheads; and technology efficiency. We'll come away with practical strategies to improve our agency's performance in those areas. And we've got some time allotted for Q&A at the end. So any questions you have, we have the Q&A open. Please answer them. We can ask some as we go, but mostly towards the end. Before we dive in, I'll remind everybody that the webinar is being recorded, and we'll send out a link to the recording with some additional resources after the session. I've been talking. I haven't even really introduced you properly, Fran. So I'll give you, without further ado, I'll hand the floor over to you, and I'll stop speaking.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Steve, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining. As Steve already mentioned, my name is Fran, and I work at Productive. Productive is an agency management platform, essentially, and about 1/3 of the agencies that use Productive are web development and design agencies. And actually, Productive originated from a 370-person dev and design agency. So that's a similar space. And yeah, as Steve already mentioned, over the past 3.5 years, I've talked to over 1,000 agency executives, owners, managers. As you can imagine, tons of talk about things like operations, margins, profitability trends, economic changes, climate, and so on. And I mean, through all of these discussions and talking to all of these super smart and intelligent and successful people, I realized that as an agency, you can't really influence outside factors, but you can try to guide your agency from the inside. And Steve would know that as well, since you're also involved with an agency and having your own business. And I would say the main question that we cover today and that I would have for you is, how can you essentially leverage the tools that you have at your disposal to help your agency and not only navigate, but to thrive? And today, we'll aim to respond to that question for you. Because successful agencies that are doing things right, usually in many cases won't give away their secrets, which we can understand. We did manage to gather some tips based on some surveys and some research that we did on how to navigate things which are essentially predictability, profitability, and efficiency with the help of technology. As Steve mentioned, this is what we'll be talking about today. But to get a bit more specific, the number one thing agencies are looking for is predictability. What does the future hold, right? The million-dollar question. And mostly that means knowing what's happening for the next few months. However, many agencies only know what's happening for the next 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes even less. That's not good enough, and we'll also get to a point as to why, but it's also not surprising. Now, according to Promethean research that surveyed over 45,000 digital agencies since 2015, less than 15% of agencies track forecasted utilization, which is not a lot, as you can imagine. Of course, the question is, why is this important, right?
Just a quick question. Can you just define kind of forecasted utilization?
That's a great question. Essentially, when we say forecast utilization, we look at a ratio of client scheduled and available hours in a specific date range. So the higher it is, the more we expect our employees will be more billable, essentially, right? So we would like to get it to not as high as possible. There will be actually a slide on that, but yeah, around 70 to 80%. But yeah,
this may be following. I was just jumping in.
Yeah, no, but yeah, it's a great question. And also on to that point, why is this important? And I mean, it essentially helps you answer the questions such as who's overbooked, who can take on more work, and this is of course super important for you to know. And also, as a rule of thumb, this is actually the next slide. We suggest targeting 70 to 80% utilization. And this is something which ideally you should know about 2 months before you actually have people starting working on that project. And when you're noticing a constant 90%, then that's a bit alarming. While everything over 95% often indicates that people are overworked. What are the solutions here? So there are a few things. When it comes to the alarming stage, you should already start looking into, or maybe even sooner, looking into potentially hiring this role or reallocating work to other employees with the same skill set. The earlier you plan and allocate resources, the more time, of course, will you have to actually react. And if there's a longer period.
So anything from, I guess, why this is an under-tracked, you mentioned kind of 15%. So why this is an under-tracked number? Is it to do with, I guess from my own experience running an agency, the challenges of kind of getting the data together in a way that, like knowing exactly, the underlying kind of principles of just getting a good set of data to look at and then being able to look at that regularly is not that easy. Is that a thing that, is that one of the things, drivers you think of why that rate is so low?
It's a great question. I think people are mostly focused with, I mean, what they are tracking, what many agencies do track are actual, so like logging actual expenses, tracking actual time. And of course, this is important, but not as many agencies, not nearly as many agencies actually focus on the future and trying to predict what will happen based on everything you've planned. Why is that the case? I'm not sure. It may be the lack of tools. The lack of tools, maybe the lack of time as well. Probably a mix of the two. But yeah, this is, I mean, when you have like a longer period, when you're seeing 90 or even 100%, of course, you can anticipate burnout, stress, and getting to that 100% utilization also means that there just hasn't been enough time to invest in employee education, research, or development. And on the other hand, if it's on the other end of the spectrum, on the left side, so below 70 or even 60%, that basically means that you have billable employees sitting on the bench and that you should probably try to find more client work for them. And if you don't know this, if you don't track forecast utilization, which 85% of agencies from that survey do not, then you just simply probably don't know. You might have an educated guess, but you probably don't know, where you can hire more and which services should you try to offer more of because you have people sitting on the bench. So I would say this is essentially a report that you can build with Productive. And basically what we did on the left side, we grouped the data by skills, by departments. And then on the right side, we're seeing this forecasted utilization. The color coding essentially is custom. You can choose your preference here. This is just a very basic example. But essentially, if it's over 100%, then these people are scheduled essentially for more time than they're actually available to work, right? So we're already late. Probably we should have hired more employees or contractors. And if it's very low, such as with the development team in October, we should probably find more work for them. And this also corresponds to another big segment of this, knowing when not to hire. And speaking to so many agency owners on a daily basis, most of them base their hiring decisions on a gut feeling, like what will this client demand look like? And of course, when you're just starting out, perhaps you even know the numbers by heart, or you actually have, as mentioned, an educated guess. But as you grow, it just becomes more difficult. And as mentioned, not knowing this can leave your teammates on the bench for a prolonged period of time. Or on the other hand, you might not be able to take on new business opportunities because of the lack of resources. And once you know what the potential demand will look like, it's easier to make hiring decisions. Sometimes, of course, partnering with skilled freelancers can be a smarter move than actually hiring and onboarding new employees. This brings us to profitability and the overheads. Now, and Steve, I think you also know from your experience, but what I know, speaking to web dev agencies, is that this is usually a big pain point. Just staying on top of metrics that give you this type of information. But yeah, luckily, there are many things that you can actually work on here. One of them is client concentration. So in a recent study that our team gathered, I think it was around 800 agencies, we found that 26% of agencies got approximately 1/3 of their annual revenue from their largest client. This is quite common, but still a big risk, right? So what happens if this one client churns? You're left very vulnerable, and your overall profitability for that quarter probably rapidly goes down. Of course, your agency will be much more resilient if you focus on building a diverse client base. Another finding, which also our team found out on the research, which is really positive, is that over half of the 800 agencies we surveyed generate at least 50% or more of their revenue from recurring sources. We were really surprised to see this. Of course, retainers help with cash flow planning. They reduce the pressure, right? So probably not as much of new businesses than needed. Improve your forecasting, and just generally, helps reduce stress and lead to happier teams.
So retainers retain the work as like recurring revenue.
Exactly. So when you know that, say each month for the next 12 months or even longer, you will have a fixed budget that you can count on based on the contract with the client. Yeah,
similarly, I'm from my background. I consider that number to be fairly high. But I guess on the larger agencies, yes. Smaller agencies, that would feel high. But yeah, your data would tell a better story on that, maybe.
Yeah. It would be, and it's actually a good point. It would be a good idea for our team to actually dive into the size of the agency as well, to see how that affects. You may be right. Yeah, I agree. From my experience also, yeah, it's usually with bigger agencies that have more retainers. But that's the dream, right? To have as many as possible, yeah, recurring revenue. Speaking of the KPIs, I can show you very nicely how, for instance, we suggest tracking this and how we track this in Productive. And bear with me for a moment, as there are a few KPIs here, and it takes a second just to wrap your head around this. So on the left side of the screen, we have the budgeting tab, and the budgeting tab essentially demonstrates whether we're expected to go over the budget. What this essentially means is if we're expected to go over and start over servicing. The red line is the total budget, and here we can see that we can actually see the month in which we're expected to go over our budget and start over servicing. On the right side of the screen, we're seeing the profitability tab, and the profitability tab basically indicates month by month what the recognized revenue and cost and profit in the end will look like. And it's also interesting to see because in some cases, because of high margins, for example, you may even go over the budget, but still be profitable. And of course, it's good to know what are the services that are actually driving that success. Finally, we always suggest keeping a close eye on your overhead costs. Overheads are generally tied to profitability, but in so many cases neglected. Again, based on your point, I would say bigger agencies have a better insight into this, but I think it's maybe just as important, if not even more important, for smaller agencies. And yeah, some agencies bake it into their cost rates, some add it as expenses on internal projects. I would say the benefit of adding overheads on top of cost rates is that then you're actually able to drill down into that net profitability of each project. Some agencies prefer to leave out this from project profitability, and then they focus on gross profitability per project. Whatever you choose, the most important thing is that you have the data actually included into your P&L reports. And also, this is like a general question, like when was the last time you reviewed your spending on utilities, rent, licenses? Of course, these fixed costs can significantly impact your margins. So it's crucial to understand their effects, how they will actually impact.
Yeah, having done, I mean, it's been a while now, but having done a lot of this in Excel, the fact that you kind of just give that data to us in a, would give that data to me in a much more easily accessible form would be quite good. Remember, it can be quite unwieldy tracking it via Excel, and you end up, we were used to end up just applying a margin, like an estimated margin to every kind of job cost, which is not obviously as accurate as when you're doing it this way.
And have you included things like time off, or was it just pure like facility costs, what you spent?
Yeah, it was. We would have just said, hey, we're estimating a kind of 20% overhead based on whatever is in the P&L, and then apply and kind of it being accurate to. But yeah, interesting.
Makes sense. Yeah, we actually here we had before, we just basically had a formula which we applied, and then we switched because we basically seen that different agencies calculate this differently. Yeah. So we essentially now allow you to choose which components go into this. So is it facility cost? Is it time? You have more control over what actually goes into this. Yeah. Step 3, technology and efficiency. So essentially, there are a lot of different tools a modern web dev agency needs, as I'm sure all of you know even better than I know. Collaboration, development tools, time tracking, budgeting tools, resourcing tools, HR tools, accounting, reporting, CRM, many others as well. And to get essentially a daily pulse on your business, aim to have your tools talk to each other. That's always our suggestion. And when you're in the process of selecting a new tool, try to look ahead. So not at what you need now, but what you may need in 6 months or 2 years, so that you're not in the place of having to constantly switch tools. Speaking to many agency owners, it happens that after a year they realize, okay, actually, you know what, we did a mistake, or we've outgrown this tool, or they just didn't follow what we were looking for. And then each time the data migration, research of the new tools, it takes time. So try to look ahead. When you do the actual process, hopefully you will be able to answer questions such as the ones which we hear very often. Are we going over the budget? What is our expected utilization? Are we getting paid on time? What's blocking our team? What are the dependencies that we're having? And another thing I would say also from my experience, make sure to review your vendor's roadmap to ensure that your needs align with what they will be working on. Whenever I hear that question, I know that people are actually taking things seriously and actually looking into what they will need a year or 2 years from now, and not just today. Speaking of which, speaking of the roadmap, we are thrilled to announce that BugHerd and Productive will soon have an integration. So stay tuned.
Yes, no, something we've been working on, which gives context for people, I guess, as to obviously you have bringing a lot of value in the conversation, but also brings a lot of brings additional context, I guess, to why why we're conversing today, because I do think there's a lot of overlap between we are both focused as organizations on trying to help agencies thrive, is the word that we use in our business, and you use that in your presentation as well. And I really do think there's a lot of opportunity for that overlap moving forward.
Looking forward to seeing that. Are there any questions that you would like to add, like to this list that you, Steve, like often see when people are shopping for a new tool like yours?
We're I think the types of, our focus is more about how you interact with your clients as much as anything else, particularly for kind of web development projects, and making sure that there's lots of ways. If you work in an internal team, you can go and kind of interact with people next to you easily enough. But when you're working with kind of external stakeholders, external freelancers, you touched on external development people, I think that's kind of really thinking through. We see that in terms of our own customer satisfaction scores, people who use us with clients versus people who use us purely internally. It's kind of night and day. There's like a 20-30% bump on people who use us externally, because that's again really thinking about what do you want. Do you want something that is an internal tool only, or something like Jira can do that job, Trello, whatever. But if you want that focus on kind of the client's experience or your stakeholders' experience, that's where we think.
Interesting. And for some of the key takeaways before we head to Q&A. So predictability, keep an eye on actual, but also forecasted utilization, but also everything else. So it's try to switch into the forecasting element. Whatever you use, whatever approach you choose to take, I'm sure you will be glad you did. And review your numbers often. This will in return help with business development, hiring, resource planning, increasing profit margins, and so on. Second, profitability, right? So make sure that you know which areas of your business perform better or worse, even when times are good. And there's a reason why we decided to essentially put emphasis on this part of the sentence, is because when things are going good, many companies don't actually think of, okay, what's driving that success? If we have 6 different roles or 6 different service offerings, yes, the package performs great, but within this package, what is it that's actually driving this, and what is just what isn't, for whatever reason? And of course, then try to expand your service offering around these high-performing areas. And of course, are you capitalizing on the tools that you're using? And being dev and design agency very likely means that you are digitally savvy, but is your business technologically mature? And if you see that you can't answer some of the questions we mentioned earlier, you're probably not maximizing the potential of the tools you use as an organization. To sum up, of course, unfortunately, many things aren't under our control, but try to take control of the things that are under your control. Try to get the data that can keep your agency resilient, and then take action when things are actually going well, and not only when they aren't. I think this was the core part of the presentation, and I'm sure you have any questions at this point.
Well, thank you, Fran, for that. Before I kind of hand over to Q&A, quickly, just if you had, I guess, on that kind of final thoughts around predictability, profitability, technology efficiency, which of those do you think an agency can kind of get the most bang for the buck for tomorrow?
Great question. Great question. I mean, I would say, of course, it starts from having the right tools. But even before you have the right tool, I would say think of what you need. Once you know what you need, shop around and do your research and find the right tool. But I would say predictability is something we see very often, especially in the past, not years, but especially in the last couple of months, when when things are stagnating, when you're just not sure which direction things will move into. That's when people really want to like to have this predictability and knowing what performs better or worse.
And broadly speaking, what are you seeing from agencies in general at the moment? Is it like, it looks to me like, in the conversations I have, it's a fairly tight market to be operating in, or tough market, I guess. And so, is that something?
I share this experience with you. Yeah, I have the same feeling. It is, and it varies a lot, I would say, of course, from agency to agency, but generally speaking, especially I have a feeling, speaking of agencies, of securing new business is something that they also have a lot of issues with. That's something, and of course, then the overall shrinking of existing budgets is also not something that helps.
Yeah, in which case, that kind of future predictability, to me, would even increase in itself, right? Because if the market is unsure, as I said, I'm less kind of aware of what's going on, knowing where what my utilization rate is for the future based on kind of what I'm planned, is probably the thing that would keep me as the business owner awake at night more than anything else, because that's when people's jobs are on the line in reality, right? So it's that's the stuff that fills me with worry, and kind of knowing where you're at on that into the future is would add a lot of value to what you do. So Fran, thank you very much for insightful responses. To attendees, we have a Q&A open. If anyone would like to just post in some questions, we'll get to those now over the next 5 or so minutes. And then, as I mentioned earlier, kind of wrap up, we'll send out a recording to everyone. And yeah, so a couple of questions are coming in. So first one, what are best practices for adjusting forecasts in real time as new data becomes available, especially in fast changing environments?
Very insightful question, I have to say, and a good one. What can I say? I think, first of all, we are speaking of this predictability, and we are talking about you have to, of course, resource people to get the data. But one thing which also is quite important is that we actually regularly adjust this forecast. So the frequency really matters here. So when the new data becomes available, you should immediately update this in your resource planner and see how this affects the forecast. One thing which I generally suggest, and I see many of our customers do this, and it helps, is like scenario analysis. So just playing around. For instance, in our tool, we have something we call placeholders, which allow you to schedule resources and see what effect will this essentially have on your profitability, margins, utilizations, and whatnot. And then essentially create a baseline scenario, and then worst case and best case scenario. And start from there, and see where that gets you. But I would say doing this frequently, and actually relying to data and not to your gut feeling, which is difficult to say no to, but this would be my suggestion.
Okay. When do agencies you speak with usually start planning work? Does it usually happen before the project kicks off?
Great question. Yes, I would say it generally does start while they're still in the opportunity/sales stage. Basically, it also depends on the way how you essentially sell your work and the way you structure your proposals. Do you have like a fixed fee, at which point you actually break it down into billable rates and whatnot? but most of our customers do actually, as soon as they have, you know, the budget, or at least approximate budget from the client, they start breaking this down into the roles they need on this project, and then they start plotting these roles on the resource planner, and they do this while we're still in the sales stage. This allows you to see who's available, who can take on more work. And then when the job is confirmed, you can basically take the whole plan and the whole proposal and move it into the budget or the production stage, essentially. And then, of course, you would continue with tracking time. And then later to see, you know, okay, what this was the forecast, this was actually delivered.
Oh, good try. Next question. So can you provide any more detail on how to accurately calculate and incorporate overhead costs into profitability without inflating project budgets?
Yeah, good question. I suggest we actually go back to this screen for this one. So it depends. I mean, of course, the first thing is to decide which factors you wish to take into account and then be consistent, right? So don't frequently change this. What would be our suggestion is that you regularly, of course, review and update the data that you see in the system. In Productive, we calculate this on a monthly level, so monthly basis. So each month we calculate your overhead for that month. Why? Facility costs might have changed, your internal time might have changed, your internal expenses might have changed. But with regards to the question of, you know, which things to incorporate, I would suggest definitely facility costs, internal time and internal expenses, and paid time off. So these are the four that I would highly suggest that you include. Of course, then you will see, for instance, in December, probably how your, you know, overhead goes up because there's more paid leave. But this is also good to know.
Maybe less in America.
Yeah, probably,
you Europeans have a very good, you know, leave sense of than. For agencies that are smaller or just starting out, what key features should they prioritize when choosing technology solutions to ensure like it's easy? Because it's easy over time as you've learned a lot about yourself, right? But when you are kind of first starting out on a journey, it can be much harder. So, you know, what advice would you give to kind of the smaller teams when they're, you know, just beginning, when they're picking technology solutions?
Great question. I mean, from my experience, we see, of course, like smaller agencies are more focused on, you know, what's happening today. They're more focused on, of course, collaboration and like more granular planning, what we internally call planning tasks. So they're not as interested in resourcing people to work on projects. They're more interested in, you know, knowing who will send the brief to the client on Tuesday, which is, of course, perfectly fine and absolutely important. What we suggest is, once you have this, which is a priority, of course, to have this sorted, to actually then focus on the long-term business needs. And ideally, if you can do it in one system, even better. But yeah, so focus on utilization and profitability sooner rather than later, because from my experience, this becomes an actual subject when agencies reach size of 15 or 20 people, which is, it should happen probably much sooner, when they actually start to systematically take things into consideration and build reports and so on.
Excellent. So, yeah, it reminded of the phrase, when you go from kind of working in the business to working on the business.
Yeah.
As the thing on that.
That's true.
Okay, well, Q&A seems to had some great questions there. I think unless anyone else has anything specific, well, here we go. We have one. How do you get new clients? Do you turn away clients if you're reaching that overworked stage? So going back to your utilization slide, what's the any recommendations for agencies to kind of manage that? Are you getting too busy?
Yeah, I mean, that's I would say, you know, a tough issue to have. But yeah, I mean, again, if you look at things like scenario analysis, then you can see what would have happened if you have someone working, of course, on a higher billable rate but with the same cost rate, for example. So you would use a placeholder to plot this out and very quickly and clearly see that, okay, this new client is probably more lucrative than the old one. Then you would probably look at your utilization to actually see whether you still have some space. If not, then probably you should make some adjustments. What to do exactly? Can you renegotiate the rates with the existing client? That would probably be a good approach if possible. If not, then yeah, probably, you know, try to divert some of the availability of the existing staff and divert from the existing projects into this new project. It would be, I would say, a shame to lose this new business opportunity if that can be avoided.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Overutilization can come is just simply because you're under resourced for the amount of work that you have, you know, coming in the door, right? So again, going back to my own experience, being able to scenario plan around that in a sense that, like, okay, you have a target of I'm targeting 80% utilization. That's something that I certainly never did, and I think would have been very useful to kind of, yeah, getting the most effectiveness I get out of the agency. You do have a tendency in an agency, I think, like particularly if you are on primarily like time-based charging, that, you know, you think of time as a unit of cost, right? Which it is. But, you know, and that is mitigated somewhat by recurring revenue streams. I think they release some of that and give you maybe a bit more. It's like one of the other benefits of more recurring revenues. It probably frees you up a little bit to plan a little bit more into the future, because, you know, what is today and tomorrow is a bit more known than if you know, so yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Fran. That was very insightful.
I do think we have, sorry for jumping into your sentence. I think there's the question also above. What are some steps agencies can take to start leveraging their data more effectively if they currently lack sophisticated analytics tools or expertise? Great question. I mean, basically, so to start leveraging the data, the question probably is, where do you get the data from? I assume spreadsheets or Excel or a similar piece of software. I mean, you can, of course, try to get the most out of this, and it's probably okay. But, you know, what we also see, and most agencies that we talk to, especially when they're smaller and they're, you know, 4 to 5 people, they start off in spreadsheets. I mean, almost everyone do. And while some of the basic metrics can be monitored, from my experience, project profitability and management of these items can, you know, starts getting messy pretty quickly. Then you need another tab, then you need another Excel spreadsheet, and then, you know, how to combine all of that. It's difficult. That's a good question.
We like to term it kind of spreadsheets and apathy in a way. Like a spreadsheet, everybody knows how to use one and can do the job. There is a point at which that spreadsheet is no longer quite fit for purpose, in the sense that it's costing you more efficiency and you know, outcomes aren't quite as good that you're getting from it. So it's time to move on, you know, move on from that spreadsheet. But that's true, yeah, for most things. Yeah, so I really appreciate your time today. Some great practical strategies to help agencies thrive. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be sharing a recording, so keep an eye out in the inbox for that. Just quickly, when people leave the webinar, there'll be a little survey there. We love feedback; it helps us improve. So if you could give us, you know, your feedback on whether this was valuable content for you. Any further questions, or you'd like to learn more about BugHerd or Productive, you also have the opportunity to kind of let us know, and we will reach out with that. So thank you once again for your time, Fran. Thank you for all of the attendees today. And yeah, we'll call it there.
Thank you, Steve, for your insights as
Excellent.
well.
Cheers. Bye.
Have a good night. Bye.